3 hours later, Robbie lifted his head off the pillow. He showered, dressed and headed to the stairs. He heard gentle snores coming from the guest bedroom. He thought about knocking but decided to just let her sleep. He glided down the steps and into the kitchen. He kept the alarm on. He could not turn it off until he left the safe house. In addition to the house alarm, he had perimeter alerts spread around the property. One of those had been triggered by Julie's escape. It had been easy for him to take a shortcut through the woods and intercept her. Part of him was glad she had decided to come back. Part of him wasn't looking forward to the added responsibility. But more of him was glad that she had returned. Was it guilt over letting a little kid die right in front of me? Am I making amends this way, by saving Julie from whatever and whoever is after her? A while later he heard a door open and feet padding across the hall. Later, the toilet flushed and the water in the sink started running. It kept going for a while. She was probably doing a sink bath to clean up. When she came downstairs 20 minutes later, the meal was far advanced. Coffee or tea? He asked. Coffee. Black, she answered. It's over there, help yourself. Cups in the cabinet by the fridge, top shelf. He checked the grits and then opened the carton of eggs. Over hard, light or scrambled, or hard-boiled. Who does hard-boiled eggs anymore? Me. Scrambled. He swished the eggs in a bowl and glanced up at the small TV sitting on the top of the fridge. He said, check it out. Julie pushed her damp hair back over her ears and glanced up as she sipped her coffee. She had changed clothes. It was still partially dark outside. But in the light of the kitchen she looked younger and scrawnier than she had last night. At least she wasn't holding the pepper spray anymore. Both hands were cupped around her coffee mug. Her face was scrubbed clean but Robbie could see her red, swollen eyes. She'd been crying. You have any cigarettes? She asked, glancing away from his scrutiny. You are too young, he replied. Too young for what? To die. I get the irony, but I don't have any cigarettes. Did you used to smoke? Yes. Why? You just seemed the type. What type is that? The do things my way type. The sound on the TV was turned down low, but the scene on the screen that came on was self-explanatory. The still smoking bus, burned to a shell of metal. All flammable objects had pretty much disappeared. Seats, tires, bodies. Both Robbie and Julie stared at it. The bus had had a full tank of gas, Robbie knew. For the trip up to New York, it had burned like an inferno. No, it was an inferno. There would be 30+ blackened corpses in that ride. Or at least parts of them, their crematorium. The medical examiner would have his hands full with this one. Can you turn up the sound? Julie asked. Robbie grabbed the remote and inched up the volume. The TV newscaster, a grim-looking man, stared into the camera and said, the bus had just departed for New York City. The explosion happened at approximately 1:30 last night. There are no survivors. The FBI is not ruling out a terrorist attack, though it doesn't seem clear at this point why the bus would have been targeted. How do you think it happened? Julie asked. Robbie glanced at her. Let's eat first. The next 15 minutes were spent chewing, swallowing and drinking. Good eggs, Julie proclaimed. She pushed her plate back, refilled her coffee cup, and sat back down. She stared at his nearly empty plate and then up at him. Can we talk about it now? Robbie crisscrossed his knife and fork over his plate and sat back. Guy who was after you might have set it off. What, like a suicide bomber? Maybe. Wouldn't you have seen a bomb on him? Probably. Most bomb packs are pretty prominent. Dynamite sticks lined together, wiring, battery, switches, and the detonator. But I tied him up, so it would have been impossible for him to set anything off. So it couldn't have been him. Not necessarily. You wouldn't need a lot of juice to blow up a bus. It could have been concealed on him. Some C4 or Semtex and the full tank of gas will take care of the rest. Some explosive vapor in the tank plus a steady supply of fuel for the fire, and it could have been set off remotely. In fact, if that's what happened, a remote has to be used. Since the guy was tied up, about half the suicide bombers in the Middle East never pull the trigger themselves. They're just sent out with the bombs and their handlers detonate from a safe distance away. I guess the handlers have the easy job, then. Robin thought back to his own handler, a safe distance away calling the shots, literally. I wouldn't disagree with that. So if Guy wasn't the source of the explosion, then something else fit that bus. Like what? Incendiary round into the gas tank is one possibility. Ignites the vapor, and boom, ideographic period. Then the gas-fed fire does the rest. Did you hear a shot? I didn't. No. But it could have been so close to the explosion that we might not have, and why would they blow up the bus? How do you think the guy found you on the bus? He came on fast and last, she said, adopting an analytical tone as she gazed at him. Robbie appreciated that tone. He used it often, so he either just got the assignment at the last minute and was playing catch-up, or more likely they lost you but then reacquired you. He paused. Which do you think it is? No idea. I'm sure you have some idea, even a guess. How about the guy in the alley with the rifle? He was after me. Yeah, that I know. You had the tracking device, but why was he after you? Not something I can talk about. Like I said before. Then that's my answer too, Julie shot back. So what now? I can drive you to the gas station. You can call for a cab. Get another bus to New York, or maybe the train. Train tickets have names on them. Yours would just say Julie. And yours would just say Will, she replied. But that's not exactly enough, is it? No. They sat staring at each other. Where are your parents? Robbie asked. Who says I have any? Everybody has parents. It's sort of a requirement. I meant parents that were living. So yours are dead. She looked away, fiddled with the handle of her mug. This arrangement is probably not going to work out. Do we go to the police? Will that work for your situation? I meant for you. No, it really wouldn't. If you tell me what's going on, I can maybe help you. You have already helped me, and I appreciate that, but I'm not sure what else you can do, realistically. Why were you going to New York? Because it's not here. Why were you going? It was convenient. Well, it's not convenient for me, so you had to go. Why? Need to know, she said, and you don't, what? Are you a junior spy or something? He glanced at the TV when he caught it out of the corner of his eye. Two sheeted bodies on gurneys were being wheeled out of a condo building. One body was big, one very small. Another reporter was out from front talking to a spokeswoman from the DC Metro Police. The spokeswoman said, the victims, a mother and her young son, have been identified, but we are withholding their names until next of kin are notified. We have several leads that we are pursuing. We are asking for anyone who saw anything to contact us with that information. And it's been reported that the FBI is heading up the investigation. Asked the reporter. The deceased woman was a federal employee. The Bureau's involvement is standard operating procedure in those situations. No, it really isn't, thought Robbie. He kept staring at the screen, hungry for more information. It seemed like a year ago since he had escaped from the building, which was now surrounded by police and federal cops. And there was another child. Asked the reporter as she held the mic up to the spokeswoman's face. Yes, he was unharmed. Was the child found in the same apartment? That's all we can say right now, thank you. Robbie turned back to find Julie staring at him. Her eyes were like acid, eating through any defense or facade he could muster. Was that you? He said nothing. Mother and kid, huh? And what? You helped me to make up for that. You want anything else to eat? No, what I want is to leave. I can drive you. No, I would prefer to walk. She went up to her room and was back down a minute later with her backpack. As he turned off the alarm and opened the front door for her, he said, I didn't kill those people. I don't believe you, she said simply. But thanks for not killing me. I've got enough shit to deal with as it is. He watched her hurry down the gravel drive. Robbie went to get his coat. Robbie put on a helmet, slid the leather cover off the Honda Street bike, fired it up, and drove it out of the barn. He parked the bike, closed and locked the barn, and then boarded the 600cc silver and blue motorcycle once more. He reached the road in time to see Julie climb into the front seat of a big-as-A boat, Ancient Mercury, driven by an old woman whose head was barely level with the top of the steering wheel. Robbie let off on the gas and fell in behind the Merc, about 50 yards back. He was not surprised when the big car turned into the gas station he had told Julie about. He raced past, cut down a side road, and doubled back. He stopped the bike and killed the engine. He watched through a gap in a hedge by the road as Julie got out and went over to the payphone. She hit 3 keys. Probably 411, he deduced. She put in some coins and dialed another number. Cab company. She talked. hung up, went inside the station, got the restroom key, and walked around the corner. She'd have to wait for the cab, and so would Robbie. His phone rang, he glanced at the screen and drew a quick breath. The number on the ID was known as a blue call. It came right from the top of his agency. Robbie had never gotten one of those before, but he had memorized the number. He would have to answer it, but that didn't mean he had to be particularly cooperative. He clicked the phone key and said, "You can't trace this call. You know that, we need to meet," the man said. It wasn't his handler. Robin knew it wouldn't be. Blue calls did not come from handlers in the field. "I had a meeting last night. I don't think I can survive another. There will be no repercussions for you." Robbie said nothing. He let his silence convey the absurdity of the statement. "Your handler was wrong. Good to know. I still didn't complete the assignment. The intel was also wrong." Robbie said nothing. He had an idea where this might be going and wasn't sure he wanted to go there. "The intel was wrong," said the man again. "What happened was unfortunate. The woman was supposed to die. She was also an American citizen." Now it was the other man's turn to say nothing. "Ig's office," said Robbie. "I was told she was part of a terrorist cell. What you were told is irrelevant. Your job is to execute the order, even if it's wrong. If it's wrong, it's not your job to deal with it. It's mine. And who the hell are you? You know this is a blue call. It's above your handler. Well above. Let's leave it at that until we can meet." Robbie watched as Julie came back around from the restroom and went inside to return the key. Why was she targeted? "Listen, Robbie, the decision on you can be changed idiographic period. Is that what you want?" "I doubt it matters what I want. Actually it does. We don't want to lose you. We consider you a valuable asset, thanks. Where is my handler?" "Reassigned." "You mean he is dead too?" "We don't play those games, Robbie, you know that." "I apparently don't know a damn thing. Things are what they are. Keep telling yourself that. You might start believing it. We are in damage control, Robbie. We need to work together on this. I'm not feeling real good about working with you guys ever again. But you need to move beyond that. In fact, it's imperative that you do. Let's move on to this. Did you send someone to kill me last night?" "Guy with a rifle in an alley. Has my shoe prints on his face. Might still be lying unconscious, in fact, in an alley. He was not one of ours. I can promise you that. Give me the exact location and we'll check it out." Robbie didn't believe him, but it didn't really matter. He told the guy where it had happened and left it at that. "What do you want from me?" "More missions. I'm not in the mood." "Next, you might have me talking out a boy Scout. There is an investigation going on in connection with the death of Janae Wind." "Yeah, I guess there is. FBI is heading it up." "I guess they are. We want you to act as an agency interface with the Bureau." As many scenarios as Robbie had thought through, that had not been one of them. "You can't be serious." Silence. "I'm not going anywhere near this. We need you to be the liaison. And we need you to play it the way we want you to. That is essential. Why would we need a liaison to this case in the first place? Because Janae Wind was working for us." The meeting place and time was arranged and Robbie slowly put away his phone. He looked through the gap in the hedge as the cab rolled into the gas station parking lot. Julie came out of the station with a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of juice. She has ID showing she is 18. She climbed into the cab, and it immediately drove off. Robbie set off and took up a tracking position roughly 50 yards back in traffic. He was not concerned about losing her. He had slipped a digestible biotransmitter into her scrambled eggs. It would be good for 24 hours and then it would wash out of our system. His tracking monitor was strapped to his wrist. He looked down at it and fell back even more. No sense letting her know she had a tail if he didn't have to risk it. She had already proven that she possessed better than average observation skills. She might be young, but she was not to be underestimated. The cab turned onto Interstate 66 and headed east toward DC. Traffic was heavy at this hour. The morning commute into DC from the west was routinely abysmal. You rode in with the sun in your eyes and you rode out the same way in the evening along with thousands of other pissed-off commuters. Being on the Honda allowed Robbie to be more nimble than in a car, and he was able to keep within sight of the cab. It rode 66 in, crossed the Roosevelt Bridge, and hung a right at the fork, which took it over to Independence Avenue. They quickly moved from the touristy monument area of DC to less beautiful parts of the capital. The cab stopped at an intersection where a number of old duplexes were located. She got out, but must have told the cab to wait. She walked down the street and the cab followed slowly. She stopped at one duplex, took out her small camera, and clicked some pictures of it. She took pictures of the surrounding area, then climbed back in the cab and it sped off. Robbie made note of the address of the duplex and took up his tale once more. About 10 minutes later Robbie realized where she was headed, and part of him couldn't believe it. The other part of him could understand it, though. She was heading back to the location of the bus explosion. The cab had to let her out a couple of blocks from her destination because roads were closed off by police barricades. Robbie looked around and saw cops and feds everywhere. This blast had taken everyone by surprise. Robbie could imagine lots of bombs were being dropped into federal mouths all over town. He parked his bike, slipped off his helmet, and took up his pursuit on foot. She was a full block ahead of him. She never once looked back. That made him suspicious, but he kept on. She turned and he turned. She turned again, and so did he. They were now on the same street where the bus had ceased to be. One block over the street was closed to pedestrians as well. The police didn't want people traipsing through their evidence beds. Robbie could see what was left of the bus, even though the police were in the process of erecting large metal frames with curtains on them to shield the site from the public. Robbie looked at the spot where he had landed after the blast occurred. He still had no idea where his gun was. That was troubling. He looked up higher, at the corners of buildings. Were there surveillance cameras posted here? Perhaps on some of the traffic lights. He looked for ATM machines, which had cameras built in. There was a bank across the street. It would not have recorded him and Julie getting off the bus, because it was positioned on the wrong side of the street for that. Right now no one knew that they were the sole survivors of the explosion. He spied a woman in her late 30s wearing an FBI windbreaker and the FBI ball cap. Dark hair, pretty face. She was about 5'6", and slender with narrow hips, and the fanned shoulders of an athlete. She had 1-inch bureau work shoes on, black pants and latex gloves. Her badge and gun rode on her belt. Robbie saw both special agents and uniformed cops talking to her. He noted their air of deference when addressing her. She might be the special agent in charge of this thing. He pulled back into the shadow of a doorway and continued watching, first the FBI agent and then Julie. Finally, Julie turned and walked down the street away from the bus's remains. Robbie waited a few moments and then followed. Julie walked to a cut-rate hotel that was wedged between two vacant buildings. She went inside. Robbie pulled up on his bike and watched through a hotel window. She was checking in using a credit card. He wondered whose name was on it. If hers, it could send a marker through the system that would inform whoever was after her right where she was. A minute later she stepped onto the elevator. Robbie broke off surveillance at that point, but he was not done with her yet. He went into the hotel and up to the front desk. The man behind it was old and looked like he would rather be pouring road asphalt in August than holding down this job. Robbie said, "My daughter just checked in. I dropped her off for AB internship on the Hill. I wanted her to use her American Express card because the card I gave her was corrupted, but I think she forgot. I tried calling her, but I guess she turned her phone off." The old gent looked put out. "She just arrived. Why don't you go ask her yourself? What room is she in?" The old fellow smiled. "I can't give out that information. It's private." Robbie looked suitably irritated, like any father would. "Look, cab, you just help me out here. The last thing I need is for some cyber creep to screw up my credit by my kid using the wrong card." The man looked at the records in front of him. "It's a lot of effort for me to do that." Robbie sighed heavily and pulled out his wallet. He slipped out a 20. "Will this help ease your effort?" "No, but two of them sure would." Robbie pulled out a second 20 and the man snatched them. "Okay, credit card used was a Visa. Name on the account was Gerald Dixon." "I know that. I am Gerald Dixon. Now, I've got two Visa cards. Can I see the numbers?" "You can for another 20. After exhibiting deep exasperation, Robbie complied. He looked at the card and memorized the numbers. Gerald Dixon was now his. Great, said Robbie. That's the corrupted card. Already ran it through, sport. Nothing I can do, the man added gleefully. Robbie said, thanks for nothing. He turned and left. He would find out who Gerald Dixon was. But he had to assume that Julie was safe for the moment. Now he had to get going. He rode back to his apartment and checked out the front and back of his building before going inside. He took the stairwell instead of the elevator. He passed no one. At this hour of the day everyone was at work. He opened the door to his apartment and poked his head inside. It was all as he had left it. It took him 5 minutes to make sure the place was empty. He employed little traps, a piece of paper wedged into a door track, a thread that would be broken when a drawer was opened, to alert him if someone had broken into and searched his place. None of them were tripped. He changed into slacks, sport coat, and white collared shirt and opened a wall safe that was behind a shelving unit holding his TV. His cred pack was in there. He hadn't used it in a long time. He slipped it inside his suit jacket and set off. The meeting was in a public place at Robbie's insistence. The Hay Adams Hotel was located across the street from Lafayette Park, which in turn was across Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House. The most protected ground on earth. Robbie figured even his agency would have a hard time killing him here and getting away with it. The Jefferson Room, an expansive eating area a short stack of steps up from the hotel lobby, was the actual site of the meeting. Robbie got there early to see who might have arrived ahead of him. Then he waited. 1 minute before the allotted time a man in his 60s walked in. Modestly priced suit, red tie, polished off-the-rack shoes, the bearing and gravitas of a lifelong public servant who had accumulated far more power than wealth. 2 tall young men were with him. Muscle, chest bumps revealed the weapons. Earwigs and wires revealed the communications. They followed him into the Jefferson Room but did not sit with him. They took up positions on the perimeter, their gazes sweeping for threats. They did not let the man sit in the line of any window. One of the men took out a slender device and set it on the piano that was parked in one corner of the restaurant. He turned it on. It emitted a humming sound. With noise with a scrambler, Robin knew because he had employed one in his work, if there are electronic surveillance devices in here, the recording will come out undecipherable. It was only then that Robbie stepped out. He allowed himself to be seen, but did not approach until the older men saw him and nodded, which confirmed to his guards that Robbie was the one he was meeting with. The room was empty even though it was lunchtime. Robin knew this was not a coincidence. The waitstaff was not in evidence. The restaurant had in effect been shut down. Robbie would have to eat lunch afterwards if he was angry. He doubted food was part of the agenda. Robbie sat catty-corner to the man, his back also to a wall. Glad you could make it, said the man. You have a name. Blue men will do. Creds, blue, just for confirmation. The man reached into his pocket and let Robbie see the badge, the picture, and the position stated on the ID card but not the name. This fellow was high up in the agency. Far higher than Robbie expected. Okay, let's talk. Jane Wind. You said she was one of ours. I checked her ID, she's DCIS, Defense Criminal Investigative Service. Did you also see your passport? Middle East trips, Germany. But DCIS has offices in all those places, that's why it made perfect cover. So was she a lawyer? Yes, but she was more than that. What exactly did she do for you? You know you are not read in. Then why ask me here? I said you weren't read in. I'm officially reading you in now. Okay, but first, I need to know exactly what happened last night. Robbie told him. He figured at this point keeping anything back was a stupid idea. However, he said nothing about Julie or the bus disintegrating. In his mind that was a separate matter entirely. Blue men sat back and took all this information in. He didn't break the silence and neither did Robbie. He figured Blue men had more to tell him than Robbie had left to convey. Agent Wind worked in the field for years. She was a good agent. As I said, after she had her children she was reassigned to the IG's office at DOD. But she still worked closely with DCIS in all of its investigation sectors. And of course she continued to work for us. How did that get her assigned to a hit list she wasn't supposed to be on? Asked Robbie. And how can something like this happen anyway? I know we're clandestine, but we are also part of an organization with checks and balances. Rogue traders lose billions of dollars of institutional money all the time. And those organizations are bigger and better funded than we are, and still it happens. If one person, or more likely a small group of people, are determined enough, they can accomplish the impossible. I saw her go into the building that night. She had no kids with her, apparently they were with a sitter she's used before that lives in the building ideographic period. This sitter took them to the apartment when Agent Wind returned home. Okay. What did Wind stumble on that got her killed? Blue Men looked curious. How do you know she stumbled onto anything? She lived in a crappy apartment with 2 little kids. There were legal dogs on her table in the living room. You can't bring home classified stuff and leave it lying around. So her work wasn't classified. According to her passport, her last trip out of the States was 2 years ago. She wasn't a field agent, at least not any longer. According to you. Her youngest child was not even a year old. She probably was pulled from the field because of that, but she was back working on something, probably considering routine. She found something, that's why she was targeted. I doubt it was directly related to her work. Blue Men took this in, his head nodding approvingly. You analyze well, Robbie. I'm impressed. And I'm full of questions. Do you know what she had stumbled onto? No, we don't, but like you, we don't think it was tied to her official duties. Why do you want me to act as the liaison with the Bureau? That's a big risk, particularly if they find out what I've been doing the last dozen years. Which they won't. Like you said, one person or a group, if they're determined enough, can accomplish the impossible. Give me your theory. Someone find out what she had discovered and they ratted her. We have a mole on our side, as evidenced by the actions of my handler and others, and the hit was carried out. They weren't sure I would pull the trigger, so they had a backup. He had no compunction about blowing the kid and his mother away. And you said my handler had been reassigned. That was a lie. I don't need lies from you. How do you figure it was a lie? He ordered me to kill Wind. You said that wasn't authorized. So the guy's a traitor. You don't reassign traitors. If you had him in custody, you wouldn't need me telling you what happened and the theorizing why. That means the handler has disappeared, along with whoever else he was working with. How many are we talking? Blue Man sighed. We think at least 3 other people in the chain, but there might be more. Robbie just stared at him. Blue Man looked down, fiddled with a silver-plated spoon on the immaculate white linen tablecloth. It's not good, certainly. Understatement of the year. What exactly do you want me to do? We have to keep tabs on the investigation without seeming to, so officially will be a special agent with DCIS, but you will actually be reporting to me. We'll provide you with all the cover and creds you need. They're being placed at your apartment as we speak. Robbie's face darkened. You say you've got at least 4 traitors. What if you actually have more? And what if one of them is at my apartment right now? These agents were pulled from an entirely separate division. They've had no contact with your handler. Their loyalty is above question, right? Forgive me if I think that's bullshit. At some point you have to trust, Robbie. No, I don't, and everyone is okay with me joining the hunt. DCIS is on board. Would you like to talk to the National Security Advisor? Or the Deputy Director of CIA? Right now it wouldn't matter to me what they said, but why me? Because you didn't pull the trigger. Ironically enough, we trust you to do the right thing, Robbie. There aren't many I can say that about right now. Robbie had thought of another possible reason why they wanted him involved. I was there, which means I will make the perfect fall guy if this goes to hell. But he said, alright. His reasoning was straightforward. He would prefer to work the case himself and bring some sort of resolution and sense of justice to it, rather than wait for someone else to do it, and maybe screw it and him beyond repair. If I go down by my own hand. Blue Man rose and put out his hand. Thank you, and good luck. Robbie didn't shake his hand. It's almost never about luck. We both know that. He turned and walked out of the Hay Adams, back into a world that seemed a little more unfamiliar and daunting than when he had walked in. Everything was waiting for Robbie when he got back to his apartment. That was not entirely comforting. None of my traps were tripped. He looked over the file, the creds, and his background information. He had to come up to speed on this case as fast as possible. But fast-tracking something like this meant that mistakes could be made. And probably will be. Then it became a case of how fast his support from Blue Man would fade away. Faster than the party and financial support of a candidate with plummeting poll numbers. It was just how the town worked. The name Will Robbie stared back at him from the credits. Ironically, his real name was the safest one to use for this sort of assignment. Robbie picked up the badge and ID card back and put it in his jacket. Also waiting for him was a fresh Glock G20 and a shoulder holster. He was glad to rid himself of the .38 throwaway. He strapped it on the buttoned his jacket. As he headed out, Robbie looked down the hall and watched as she unlocked her door. Annie Lambert turned to him. She was in a black business suit and sneakers with white ankle socks. "Hello, Will," she said. "Don't usually see you here in the middle of the day," he said. "I forgot something. Lunchtime was the first chance I've had to come and get it." "What are you all dressed up for?" "Just a meeting." "How did your chill session go?" "What?" "Oh, it went fine." The inquiries into Lambert triggered by her contact with Robbie had turned up nothing. "Not surprising. To work at the White House one had to be squeaky clean," he said. "Sorry I left so abruptly, I was just tired." "No problem. I was too, actually." She hesitated and sat in a subdued voice. "But maybe we can have that drink sometime." "Yeah, maybe we can," said Robbie, who was thinking of all that lay ahead of him. "Okay," she said uncertainly. He started to walk off and then stopped, realizing that he'd once more been abrupt with her. He turned to her. "I appreciate the offer, Annie. I really do, and I want to have a drink with you." She brightened. "That'd be great. And let's do it soon," he said. "Real soon. Why? Are you going somewhere?" she asked. "No, but I've wanted to start getting out more, and I'd like to do that with you." Her smile widened. "Okay, Will, you know where I live." He walked off and wondered why he was suddenly so taken with the young woman. She was lovely and obviously smart, and maybe she was smitten with him, but in the past that had not mattered to Robbie. He turned and looked back at her apartment. She had gone inside, but he had the image of her standing there in the tennis shoes and the business suit. He smiled. Robbie drove his Audi to the crime scene. With his creds he was able to park within the security perimeter. On the way he had looked at his tracking device as he passed the hotel where Julie was staying. She was still there. He walked to the apartment building's entrance feeling enormously uncomfortable. He was going to help investigate a murder at which he was an eyewitness. There was a pack of cops in suits huddled in the lobby of the building. Robbie made his way to them, thinking he would check in and introduce himself to the people running the case. The huddle started breaking up as he approached. Out from its middle stepped the same female FBI special agent he had seen at the bus bombing. She came forward, looking at him inquisitively. He pulled his cred pack, flashed first the badge and then ID card. She reciprocated with her cred pack. It said she was FBI Special Agent Nicole Vance. "Agent Robbie, welcome to the show. I've got some questions for you," she said. "I look forward to working on this case with you, Agent Vance." She said, "I got a call from my supervisor about you. We're to associate you with the case, but purely for background information on the deceased and any other information that will help us solve the case. But the FBI has the lead, meaning I have the lead." "I didn't mean to imply otherwise," Robbie said smoothly. Vance seemed to study him more closely. "Okay," she said cautiously. "Just so long as we understand the ground rules. What would you like my help on? Any background you can give us on the victim." Robbie pulled a flash drive from his jacket pocket. "Her official background file is contained on here." She took the drive and handed it to one of her associates. "Get it read and summarized ASAP." She turned back to Robbie. "We were just about to go over the crime scene again. Care to join us?" "I'd appreciate that. My superiors want to know I'm earning my pay." This comment earned him a smile. "I guess Fed agencies all operate similarly," she said. "I guess they do." As they headed to the elevator, Vance said, "Did you hear about the bus explosion?" "I saw it on the news," said Robbie. "I understand FBI is investigating that too. More specifically, I am." "A lot on your plate," he commented. "Might be a good reason to merge the investigations." "Why is that?" "We found a gun at the scene of the bus explosion." Robbie kept his gaze straight ahead even as his heartbeat quickened. "Gun," he said. "Yeah, and we've already run ballistics." The Glock we found matches a slug we took from the floor of the apartment the deceased lived in. So in my mind, the two cases are definitely connected. Now we just have to find out how. The killer might have just thrown the gun away during his escape. Might just be a coincidence it was found near the bus explosion. I don't believe in coincidences, at least not ones like that. As they stepped off the elevator and headed to the condo where two people had been murdered right in front of him, Robbie, despite the cool air, wickered a drop of sweat off his forehead. He would take a 100 megalomaniacal Saudi princess and bloodthirsty cartel chieftains over this. The apartment had changed since Robbie had last been there. The cops were doing a thorough forensic search and fingerprint powder residue, evidence markers and 35mm cameras flashing off were evident throughout the small space. Robbie eyed a sealed evidence box on the particle board table. Is that Agent Wynn's work papers? Laptop. Vance nodded. It is. We have sealed it pending your agency review. I'm cleared all the way on things like that, but I didn't want to step on your toes. Appreciate that. But we will need to be read in. If there's something in those docs and files that got her killed, the Bureau needs to know it. Understood. I can have the review done today and you can be read in directly after. Vance's smile was guarded. I never met a more cooperative agency liaison. You are going to spoil me. I'll do my best, Robbie said. Until I stop being cooperative, he thought. There were pick marks on the front door lock, Vance said. They were subtle, so the person knew what he was doing. Follow me. They walked into the bedroom. Robbie looked around. The bodies had been removed, but in his mind he still saw them on the bed, their heads pulverized. Wynn and her son Jacob were found on the bed. She was holding him. One shot killed them both. She pointed to the shattered window. We have run a trajectory. Shot came from that high-rise building, well over 300 meters away. We are pinpointing the exact room. The building is abandoned, so it's doubtful anyone saw anything. But we are still following up. If we are lucky, the shooter left something behind. You won't be that lucky, thought Robbie. But you said you found a Glock round in the floor. How does that tie into a shot at that distance? It wasn't a pistol round that killed them, had to be a rifle round. I know, that's what's so puzzling. If I have to speculate, there were two people involved. The person in this room last night fired a shot into the bed. It went through and lodged in the floor. That slug matched the gun we found underneath a car next to the bus explosion. But the kill shot came through the window, hit Jacob, passed through his head and impacted his mother. Death was instantaneous for both, or so the Mies said. Robbie remembered the look on Janae Wynn's face and wondered how truly instantaneous her death had been. So two shooters. Doesn't make a lot of sense, he said. It makes no sense, replied Vance. But that's because we don't have enough facts. We collect enough of those it will make sense. I appreciate your optimism. Robbie stood in front of the bed, in nearly the exact spot from which he'd fired his weapon the night before. So the shooter who presumably broke into the apartment fired into the bed. Where was the slug found? Vance mentioned for one of her techs to move aside the bed. Robbie saw the evidence marker next to a hole in the wooden floor. Robbie held up an imaginary pistol. He aimed and clicked his finger while Vance watched. He would have been standing about here, said Robbie, who of course knew this for a fact. The mattress and box spring seem really thin. I doubt they would have diverted the flight path of the round much, not at this close range. That's what I figured too, said Vance. No other wounds on the bodies. The round fired into the mattress didn't hit them. Negative. No human residue on it and no other wounds on the victims. So he fired a shot into the mattress. Why? To get their attention. Maybe, said Vance. Were they awake when they were shot? Looked to be. The position where they fell on the bed leads me to believe they were awake when they were killed. So he fires, but doesn't hit them. He did it to get their attention, or maybe to get them to be quiet. Anyone report hearing any screams? Vance sighed. If you can believe it, the only person who lives on this floor and was here last night is an old man who's both deaf and blind. She, of course, heard nothing. The only other floor resident was working in Maryland at the time. The apartments above and below this one are vacant. Oh, I believe it, thought Robbie. But the round from outside killed them, he said. He went over to the broken window and examined it. He looked outside beyond to the building he could not see last night. The alleyway was down below, the one he had been supposed to use to make his escape. There were other buildings separating the two high-rise structures, but they were all one story. The shooter would have had a clean shot. Okay, gunman inside. Shooter outside. Gunman fires into the bed. Shooter outside kills Agent Wind and her son. He turned back to Vance. Wind had two sons. That's the other really puzzling piece. Her other son is less than a year old. His name is Tyler, by the way. He was found by a woman on the third floor. Found how? It's crazy, Robbie. Someone knocked on her door shortly after the Winds were killed. At least according to the preliminary time of death the medical examiner gave us. The woman opened the door and there was Tyler in his car carrier sound asleep. She recognized him as Wind's son and tried phoning her, then went to her apartment. No one answered, so she called the cops. That's when the bodies were discovered. You have a theory for that? She shook her head. I know this sounds unbelievable, but it might be that whoever broke into Wind's apartment took the kid down there. Why? Why kill an infant? He can't testify against you. They had no problem killing the other son, countered Robbie. Been thinking about that. Look at the hole in the window and then look at the bed. If Wind had grabbed up her other son, maybe to protect him against the intruder, he might have been on the left side, in other words, facing the window. Robbie finished this thought for her. Shooter fires, really only aiming to hit Wind, but the shot hits the kid first and then her. Maybe he intended to kill them both, or at least wanted to kill Wind, and if the kid was in the way, too bad. That's how I see it, agreed Vance. So that sets up an interesting possibility. Such as, how's this for a theory? Intruder comes in, just a standard burglary. He doesn't mean to, but somehow awakens Wind and her son. He fires a shot into the bed to keep them quiet. At the same time, unbeknownst to him or Wind, of course, a shooter is targeting her from that other building at the exact same time. He fires, killing her and her son. The intruder is stunned. He could have ducked down, thinking he might be shot next. He sees the other kid in the carrier, grabs it up, and during his escape drops him off at another apartment, then he gets away. I thought you didn't believe in coincidences, said Robbie. She smiled weakly. I know. It's like the mother of all coincidences, isn't it? It's also exactly what happened, thought Robbie. They were in the other building, from where the kill shot had come. It was abandoned, filthy, full of junk, easy to get into and out of. In other words, it was perfect. Robbie and Vance had looked through several rooms that could have served as the shooter's sanctuary. When they entered the fifth one, Robbie said, "This is it." Vance, frozen, hands on hips, looked at him. Why? Robbie walked over to one of the windows. Window is open a notch. None of the others were. The sight line is dead on. He pointed at the windowsill. And the dust has been disturbed. Check the pattern. Muzzle mark. He pointed at a dark stain the size of a dime farther along on the sill. Residue from the discharge. He looked down at the concrete floor. Knee imprints in the dirt. He used the sill as his center of support, lined up his shot, and took it. He knelt down, slipped out his gun, took aim through the window, lining up his iron sights with the window with the hole in it across the way. There's a rack of lights on the taller building on the opposite side of the street where Wind lived. At night those lights would be on. A shooter would be looking right at them, and that would screw his shot into the fourth floor over there. Except not from this spot. The angle is perfect. He rose, put his gun away. This is it. Vance looked impressed. You have special forces in your background. If I did, I couldn't tell you. Come on. I know lots of former Delts and SEALs. I'm sure you do. She looked out the window. I also know some people at DCIS. I texted them about you. None of them have heard of you. I just came back into the country, said Robbie, transitioning into his cover story. If you really want to check me out, call DCIS. I can give you my direct superior's contact info. Okay, and I will, she said. So my burglar theory and separate shooter theory looks sound. I can't see how the guy in the apartment last night could have known about the shooter over here. You're right, I didn't, thought Robbie. Vance continued. But now the question becomes, why kill Wind? What was she working on for your people? I'll need to know that. I'll check with my folks, but it could be something she stumbled onto, said Robbie. Stumbled onto. How does that make sense? Not saying it does, only saying it has to be considered. Just because she worked for DCIS doesn't mean that was the reason she was killed. Okay, but forgive me if I take as my working hypothesis that her death was related to her work. Robbie said, that's your prerogative. Has her ex been notified? In the process. Her son is with social services for now. What's her former husband do? You don't know, she said in surprise. Not without looking at the file, no. I was just assigned to this case, Agent Vance. Cut me a little slack. Okay, sorry. Rick Wind. He's retired military but he has another job. We're in the process of tracking him down now. In the process of tracking him down. He'd have to have seen the news. He should have called you by now. Believe me, Robbie, I thought of that. You have his home address. Maryland. My agents have already been there. It's empty. You said he has a job. Where does he work? He owns a pawn shop in Northeast DC. Bladensburg Road. Please call the Premium Pawn Shop. Not the greatest part of town, but then you don't usually find pawn shops next to the Ritz, do you? Premium Pawn Shop. Catchy. Anybody tried to reach him there? No one's there either, all locked up. So where is the guy? If I knew that, I would have told you. If he's not at home, and he's not at work, and he hasn't called the police, then there are only a few possibilities. He either doesn't watch TV, listen to the radio, or have any friends, or he killed his soon-to-be ex-wife and kid and is on the run, or else he's dead too. That's right, but you really think the guy killed his ex and kid using a sniper rifle? Domestic issues like that are usually face-to-face. Well, he was former military, and they were getting divorced, so it was not amicable. I don't know. I'm making inquiries. Maybe you can help on that score. She's with your agency after all. He ignored this. Jane Wind have any family in the area that you know of? She looked at him quizzically. Are you sure you two are from the same agency? It's a big agency, not that big. FBI dwarfs it. FBI dwarfs pretty much everybody. So, family in the area? None. Neither apparently does her hubby, at least that we can find. But I've been working this case for less than 8 hours. Robbie said, have you searched his home and the pawn shop? Home, yes, nothing that helped us. Pawn shop next. You care to tag along? Absolutely. The Bukas pulled up in front of the Premium Pawn Shop and Robbie and Vance stepped from one, while two other FBI agents climbed out of their vehicle. There were bars across the front door and windows of the pawn shop. The door had 3 serious locks. The businesses next to it were gutted, with blackened plywood nailed against their fronts. Trash littered the streets and Robbie spotted a couple of drudges stumbling along. Vance sent the other 2 agents to check the rear of the building while she and Robbie approached the front. She shaded her eyes and peered inside. Can't see anything. Can you knock down the door or do you need a warrant? Rick Wind's house was less problematic. We suspected he might be hurt. This place is obviously closed. He could be inside, hurt or dead, said Robbie, joining her at the front of the shop and peering between the bars into the darkened interior. That should be enough. And if we find evidence he committed the crime and his defense lawyer gets it thrown out because our search was determined to be unlawful under the 4th Amendment. I guess that's why you FBI agents get the big bucks, and the big career derailment. How about I kick open the door and search the place? Still have the same evidentiary problem. Yeah, but it'll be my career that's derailed, not yours. I'm here with you. I'll tell them I did it all on my own, against your express instructions. He examined the door and the framing around it. Steel on steel, tough stuff, but there's always a way. What kind of Fed are you? She asked, her eyebrows hiked. Not the carrier-kissing type obviously. Stay here, Robbie, you can't just. He drew his pistol, fired 3 times, and the trio of locks fell out onto the sidewalk. Holy shit, exclaimed Vance as she jumped back. They heard running feet, as the 2 other agents were no doubt coming to find out what had happened. An alarm will probably go off, said Robbie calmly. You might want to call the cops and tell them not to bother. Before she could say anything, he opened the door and stepped inside. No alarm went off. Robbie did not take that as a positive sign. He kept his gun out, felt for the light switch, hit it, and the pawn shop was quickly draped in weak light. Robbie had been in pawn shops before and this looked pretty typical. Watches, lamps, rings and an assortment of other items were stacked neatly in bins or inside glass cabinets. All had tags with numbers written on them. The man's military background, thought Robbie. You never lost that precision. Or at least most didn't, but the floorboards smelled of urine and the ceiling was blackened with decades of grime. Robert didn't know what the place had been before it was a pawn shop, but it did not warn well. There was a cash register cage. Robin noted the bulletproof glass. There were scratches on the glass and what looked on to be 2 dents from gunshots, upset customers or people looking to rip the guy off. Ex-military Rick Wind probably dealt with that with his own hardware. Robbie figured there were at least 2 guns in the cage somewhere. He looked toward the ceiling corners and saw the camera mounted in one. It had a direct shot of the cage. That might come in handy. Robbie moved forward, doing visual sweeps. He heard nothing except the sounds of life outside. A breeze pushed through the open door, rustling lampshades and lifting tags on the merchandise. When he heard footsteps behind him, he turned to see Vance there, gun out, her expression seriously pissed off. You are an idiot, she hissed. I told you to stay outside, he whispered back. You don't tell me to do anything, not unless you want your ass. Robbie put a finger to his lips. He'd heard it before her. A squeak, and then another. He pointed to the back of the shop. She nodded, her angry expression gone. Robbie led the way, turning down one aisle and rode it back to a pair of swinging doors with a gap between. The doors were moving slightly, but that was not the source of the squeak. He looked at Vance, pointed to himself and then the door, and then motioned to the right. She nodded in understanding and took up position on his right flank. Robbie lifted one foot, kicked one of the swing doors open and bulled inside, his gun making arcs and ready to fire as he stepped to the left. Vance followed on the right and cleared that part of the room. Nothing. She looked down and grimaced as the grey critter skittered into a darkened corner. Rats. Robbie looked down and saw the animal's tail before it whisked out of sight. I don't think rats squeak like that, said Robbie. Then what? She asked. That. He pointed to one darkened corner of the room on the left side. Vance looked that way and caught a breath. The man was hanging upside down from the exposed rafter. They approached, his body was swinging slightly, and the rope was squeaking against the wooden beam. Robbie looked at the slit between the pair of swing doors. Acted like a funnel with the front door open, he said, with the wind outside, got the body to move a bit. Vance looked at the dead man. He was black, and green, and purple. Is that Rick Wind? Asked Robbie. Who the hell can tell? Replied Vance. He's been dead a while, didn't kill himself. Hands are bound, not strangulation. He touched the man's arm, and he didn't kill his wife and kid. Condition of the body means he was dead before they were, rigors long since past. Robbie bent over and looked at the man's open mouth. And there's something else. What? It seems they cut out his tongue. Robbie had left Agent Vance to deal with the new body in the pawn shop. They had confirmed that it was Rick Wind. The cause of death was not obvious and would probably require a medical examiner to figure out. They had checked the shop's surveillance camera. Someone had taken the DVD. Robbie was now sitting in his apartment typing on his computer. He was not working the murder of Janae Wind and her ex-husband. He had his mind on something else, at least for now. He typed in the name Gerald Dixon. He got too many hits, because it was too common a name. He switched tactics, going from Google to a more exclusive database to which he had access. The hits that came back were more manageable. He refined his search, utilizing other databases. It finally narrowed to one name. Robbie looked at the street address. It did not match the one that Julie had gone to in the cab, but one line on the man's record caught his attention. Foster care provider. The guy and his wife took in foster kids. He wrote down the address and then checked the tracking device. Its range was long enough for it to reach here. Julie had not moved from the crummy hotel. That seemed unusual unless she was afraid of being spotted. In any event, she apparently was no longer interested in leaving town. He wondered what had changed her mind. Was it the house where she had stopped? Robbie was going to find out, but he had somewhere else to go first. Gerald Dixon lived in a 2-story duplex in a lousy neighborhood. When Robbie knocked on the door, it took a long time to get a response, and he heard noises inside that bespoke of frenzied activity. When the guy finally opened the door, Robbie noted the crimson patches on his cheeks, the bloodshot eyes, and the smell of breath freshener that shot like a cannonball from his mouth. The idiot's been slapping himself to get sober and sucking on Listerine to hide the booze smell. The foster care standards must be plumbing in this country. Yeah, the man said in an unfriendly tone. Gerald Dixon, who wants to know? Robbie flashed his badge. I'm with DC Internal Affairs. Dixon took a step back. He was an inch shorter than Robbie but unhealthy thin. Most of his hair was gone, though he couldn't have been much over 40. He had the pale, translucent skin and jerky manner of someone whose body and mind had been substance abused to the point of no return. Internal Affairs. Ain't that for cops? It's for a lot of things, said Robbie. Including your situation. May I come in? Why? To talk about Julie. It was Robbie's gut instinct that the girl had used her real first name. Dixon's face screwed up. If you find her, you tell her she better get her butt back here. If she ain't here, I don't get paid. So she's gone missing. That's right. Can I come in? Dixon looked put out, but he nodded, stepped back, and let Robbie pass through. The inside of the house looked no better than the outside. They sat on tattered chairs. Baskets of dirty laundry were piled everywhere, but Robbie had a notion that before he knocked on the door all the clothes had been strewn on the floor. He also noted papers and the edge of a beer can sticking out from under a chair. He wondered what else was under there. His seat was very hard. He didn't think it was the cushion. A small, curvy woman wearing tight jeans and an even tighter blouse came out of the back, wiping her hands on the pants leg. She looked to be at most thirsty. She had mousy brown hair, a heavily made-up face, and the air of someone who was totally disconnected from reality. She lit up a cigarette and eyed Robbie. Who's he? Some dude from Internal Affairs, growled Dixon. Robbie flipped open his badge. I'm here to talk about Julie. And smoking around our children is prohibited, he added. The woman quickly stubbed the cigarette out on a tabletop. Sorry, she said without sounding sorry in the least. The woman snapped, she's gone, run off, little shit never appreciated what we gave her. And you are? Asked Robbie. Patty, Jerry and me are married. How many foster kids do you have currently? 2. Not counting that shit Julie, said Patty. I would prefer if you wouldn't refer to one of the children under our responsibility as a shit, Robbie said firmly. Patty glanced at her husband. Is he with the foster care people? He told me Internal Affairs, said Gerald, looking betrayed. I am with the government, said Robbie. That's all you two need to know. So where are the other kids? Patty adopted a loving matronly tone. In school, she said, smiling. We send those little angels to school every day, just like we are supposed to. Robbie heard a sound from upstairs. You have kids of your own? He asked, glancing upward. Gerald and Patty exchanged a nervous glance. He said, we got 2 of our own, little ones, don't go to school yet. That's them up there probably reading. They're real advanced for their ages, right? Now about Julie. He opened a notebook he drew from his jacket. Gerald Dixon's eyes widened as he saw the revealed weapon. You are carrying a gun. That's right, said Robbie. I thought this was about foster care, said Patty. This is about what I say it's about. And if you do want to stay out of serious trouble, I suggest you cooperate fully. Robbie had decided he was done playing nice with these idiots. He didn't have the time or the desire. Gerald sat up straighter and Patty sat down next to him. Robbie said, tell me about Julie. Is she in trouble? Asked Gerald. Tell me about her, repeated Robbie firmly. Full name, background, how she came to be here, everything. Don't you already know that? Asked Patty. Robbie looked at her with the face of granite. I'm here to confirm the information we already have, Mrs. Dixon. And please keep in mind the request I made for cooperation and then focus on the possible consequences of not cooperating. Gerald sharply elbowed his wife and snapped, just shut up and let me handle this. He turned back to Robbie. Her name is Julie Getty. She came here, about 3 weeks ago. Age, 14. Why was she placed in foster care? Her parents couldn't take care of her. Yeah, that I get. Why couldn't they care for her? Were they dead? No, don't think so. See, the agency people don't really tell you that much about that stuff. They just give you kids and you take care of them. Patty added quickly, just like they were our own. Right, like you said, not counting that shit Julie. Patty colored and looked down. Well, I didn't mean it exactly like that. Gerald added, truth is, Julie could be a real piece of work. Speaks her mind too much for my taste. And so she's not here anymore. Run off in the middle of the night. Patty said, we've been so worried. And you of course reported this, right? Gerald and Patty looked at each other. He said, well, we were hoping she'd come back. So we were waiting for a bit, added Patty. Has she run off before? Not this time, well, except for last night. Robbie looked up from his notes. This time. Was she placed with you before? 3 times. What happened those times? Don't know exactly, said Gerald. I think her parents got her back. Remember the caseworker telling me Julie's mom and dad would do that, but then there she'd be back in foster care. When was the last time you saw her? Last night right after I served her a delicious dinner, said Patty in a syrupy tone that made Robbie want to pull his gun and fire a shot just over her head. And when did you discover her missing? This morning when she didn't come down. So you don't check on your beloved wards at night. She was very private, said Gerald hastily. We didn't like to butt in. Robbie pulled the empty beer can out from under the chair. I can see that. He waved his hand in the air. And you might want to open some windows, get the reefer smell out. We don't do drugs, said Gerald, feigning astonishment. And I don't know whose that is, added Patty, pointing at the beer can. Right, Robbie said dismissively. Have you heard from Julie since she left? They both shook their heads. Any reason to believe someone would want to hurt her? The Dixons looked genuinely surprised by this question. Gerald said, why has something happened to her? Just answer the question. Anybody come around here you didn't know? Suspicious cars. Gerald said, no, nothing like that. What the hell has she got herself involved in? Gangs. Patty put a hand up on her ample bosom. Do you think we might be in danger? Robbie closed his notebook. I certainly wouldn't rule out the possibility. Some folks don't care who they hurt. He had to fight back a smile. He rose, lifted up the seat cushion, and pulled out a baggie of coke, some vials containing a brown liquid, 2 capped syringes, and elastic strips used to pop the blood vessels to the surface for ease of injection. And next time try locating your pharmacy somewhere more private. They both stared down at the drugs and related paraphernalia but said nothing. As Robbie was walking down the street he saw a woman holding an envelope striding along with 2 police officers in tow. You heading to the Dixons? He asked as the woman neared. Yes, who are you? Just someone who wants you to make sure they never get foster kids again. The woman waved the envelope. Well, your wish has just been granted. She steamed on with the officers right behind. Robbie walked on. Something on his wrist beeped. He looked down at the tracker. Julie Getty was finally on the move, and Robbie was pretty sure where. Julie clambered up the vine and slipped inside her bedroom window. She squatted on the floor listening. All she could hear were her own heartbeats. Her legs shaky, she moved down the stairs, holding onto the wall for support. She rounded the bend, closed her eyes, and then opened them. It was all she could do not to scream. Robbie stared back at her. You get around, he said. She looked quickly around the room. There was nothing there except furniture, expecting to find something else. He said, moving toward her. She backed up a step. How did you get here? She asked. Followed you. That's impossible. Nothing's impossible really. This is your home, right? She said nothing, just stared up at him, more in curiosity than fear. He looked at a picture on a side table. Your mom and dad were nice looking, and there you are right in the center. Happy times, it seems. You don't know anything, snapped Julie. Correction, I know some things. Like you are in danger. People are looking for you, people who have a lot of money, muscle and connections. How do you know that? Because they covered up 2 murders right here. Julie's eyes widened. How did you know that? Robbie motioned to the wall next to where she stood. Fresh paint, but only in that spot. It was put there to cover something up. He pointed to the floor. Used to be a square of carpet here. You can see where the wood is lighter. It's gone. Again, covering something up. How do you know it's about a murder? It could be anything. No, not anything. You paint walls and remove rugs to take away forensics. Blood, tissue, other bodily fluids. And they missed a spot of blood on the baseboard over there. Did you expect to find their bodies here? There would have been a smell by now, you know, an unmistakable one. You spend a lot of time around dead bodies. she said wearily. Ever since I hooked up with you. We are not hooked up in any way at all. I know about your foster parents, though calling them parents stretches all credulity. I don't like that you've been snooping around my life, she explained. The city busted them, he said. The other kids there have been taken away by now. I think you had something to do with that. Julie's angry look faded. They didn't deserve to be treated like that. No little kid does. Now tell me what happened here. Why? Like I said, I want to help you. Why? Call me a good Samaritan. There aren't any of those left, she said firmly. Not even your parents. You leave my parents out of this, she said sharply. Did you see how they died? Is that why you were on the run? Julie backed up until she was against the wall. For a moment Robbie thought she was going to run for it, and he wasn't sure what he would do if she did. Were they mixed up in something over their heads? He asked. Drugs. My mom and dad wouldn't hurt anyone. And no, this had nothing to do with drugs. So they were killed. Just a simple nod will do. She moved her head forward a notch. You saw that happen. Another nod. Then you need to go to the police. If I go to the police they'll put me right back in foster care, and then those people will find me. The guy on the bus, he was the one. I think so. Julie, tell me exactly what happened. It's the only way I can help you. If last night showed you nothing else, it's that I'm someone who can get things done. What about those people on the TV? Did you kill them? A mom and her kid. You said you didn't do it, but I need to know the truth. Well, if I did kill them there's no way in the world I would admit it. But if I did do it why would I be here trying to help you? Give me a reason. She let out a long breath, played with the straps on her backpack. Do you swear you didn't kill them? I swear I didn't kill them. I'm working with the FBI right now to try and figure out who did. He pulled out his badge and showed it to her. Julie said, okay, I guess it's cool. I got away from the Dixons and came here last night. I hadn't been home very long when I heard someone come in. I thought it was my parents, but someone else was with them. He was yelling at them, asking them stuff. Robbie drew a few steps closer. Asking them what? Try to be as precise as you can. Julie screwed up her face, thinking. He said, how much do you know? What have you been told? Stuff like that. And then. He hurt one of them. Tears trickled down her face. I heard a gunshot. I ran down the stairs. The guy looked at me. My dad was against the wall over there. He was all bloody. The guy pointed the gun at me, but my mom hit him and he fell down. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay and help her, but she told me to run. Julie shut her eyes, but the tears eased out from under her eyelids. I went back to my bedroom and climbed out the window. Then I heard another shot, and I ran hard. I was a coward. I knew that shot meant my mom was dead, but I just ran. I was a shit. I just left her to die. She opened her eyes and stiffened when she saw Robbie standing next to her. And if you hadn't run, you'd be dead, he said. And that would have done no one any good. Your mom saved your life. She sacrificed her life for yours. So you did the right thing, because you did what your mom wanted you to do, stay alive. Robbie handed her a tissue from a box on the table and she dried her tears and then blew her nose. So what now? She asked. Do you think anyone around here heard the shots? I doubt it. The place next door is empty. So is the duplex across the street. This used to be an okay neighborhood, but then everybody lost their jobs, including your parents. They worked at whatever they could find. My mom went to college, she added proudly. My dad was a good guy. She looked down. He just sometimes got down on himself, felt like the whole world was against him. What were their names? Curtis and Sarah Getty. No relations to the Getty oil folks, I guess. If so, nobody ever told us. He said, okay, here's my plan. We find out who killed your parents and why. But if it was the guy on the bus, he's clearly dead. Did you leave from this house last night and go directly to the bus stop? Yes. Then the guy wasn't alone. He couldn't have policed this place, gotten rid of 2 bodies and made it to the bus. There have to be others. But why my parents? I loved them, but it's not like they were important or anything. You sure they weren't involved in drug dealing or gangs or anything? Look, if they were drug kingpins, do you think they'd be living in this place? So no enemies. No, at least not that I know of. Where did they work? Dad at a warehouse in Southeast. Mom at a diner a few blocks from here. So your dad would go over there for meals maybe. Yeah, I spent a lot of time at the diner too. Why? Just digging for info. I want to leave here. Like right now. This isn't my house anymore. Okay, where do you want to go? I got a place I'm staying. Yeah, I tracked you down there. And it was stupid to steal and use Dixon's credit card. They'll bust you for that. And more importantly, people can track you. How did you underscore? She stopped and looked annoyed. I have cash. Save it for now. So where do I go? Not back to your safe house. It's too far out of town. No, I've got another place. Why don't you pack some things and come on?